So in the previous video or two, I was looking at soft body physics, and the thing is, it's one thing to just sort of pop it onto a cube or to pop it onto a simple cube and play with the settings incrementally. It's another thing to apply it to an actual situation. The scenes change, details in the scenes change, the number of vertices in an object change, things become more detailed. So, as an example, I've got something here that had a little more detail that I applied similar settings to, and when I go ahead and push play, I get something along these lines. So clearly that doesn't work. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pause this and I'm going to revisit the issue. And let's just take a look again at some simple cubes and just tweak the settings a little bit more and get a sense of how things go. All right, so kind of walking through this, we can see a variety of cubes that just sort of incrementally change over time. And I just want to take a minute to sort of discuss, or several minutes actually, what's going on. So in this particular case, I've applied physics. Oh, and if we take a peek in edit mode, all the objects are similar, so not a great amount of detail. So this one has soft body physics applied, but let's go to the physics. Sorry, we actually went to constraints. There we go. And we can see that basically this has the default settings on. This next one is set up the same way, except what I did was I unchecked the goal button. So the difference between that one and this one is simply that I unchecked the goal button. Okay? From there, we see that this sort of collapses in on itself, like in an impossible way, and yet this seems to kind of hold its outer form together somewhat. Well, the difference there is that in this case, I checked the self-collision button. So now it's trying to maintain its shape somewhat. Moving over a little bit, what I've started to do here is to I started with going and checking the stiffness box. And now it's trying to hold together as more or less as a cube. I then moved on and I took the shear down just a little bit so that there was a little bit more give in it. All right. From there, we can see that the difference now is that I started to adjust the push and the pull on this. One affects sort of the edges and their attempt to maintain themselves, and the other one affects the rest of the body and its attempt to sort of maintain itself and keep it from sort of crushing or scrunching together into something. But this again is me just sort of taking that up a little bit and seeing where we get. And again, then I do it on the pull. The damping I left alone, but then the next thing that I did was I took the plasticity up quite a bit. And now we can see the change with the plasticity, how this sort of is jumping up and down, whereas this is become a little more nuanced in how it moves. So then from there, I took the bending up a little bit. Again, we can see now that it's getting more subtle and subtle with each step as I move. And then, okay, from here, this is where I started to take the push and pull back down a little bit. Because if this bag is sort of falling, what's going to be a bag, is I do want it to be able to settle a little bit. So I started to take those values down a little bit and just sort of experiment with that. Don't want it to go too far. But the idea is that as it lands, now in this case I took the pull down, in this case I took the push down to a similar number, the same number. But I'm just trying to get it so that we have something like that happening. And I'm just sort of taking those down until it gets to a point where, well, where maybe I've gone a bit too far. Again, depending on what's in that bag that I'm going to be modeling. Now, these things that are happening, this has to do with the length setting. And basically what it does is it adjusts the length of the given vertices, or given edges. And so in this case, I took the length down from a value of 1 to 25, and it basically shrinks down to almost nothing. In this case, I expanded the length to 150, and you see that it explodes up into a larger size. And then I decided that I don't want to deal with that anyway, so I took that value back down to 0 and decided to move on. Now from here, the last couple of steps that I got into was I decided to add a little bit of a ridge to see how that mimics, like if there's a flap on the bag. And this is with the settings just more or less being the same. Now at this point, you see how it's become a little bit more rigid. And what I've done differently here is I went up to the object settings and I created a vertex group. And in each case, the vertex group is slightly differently, and you see slightly different behaviors. But that is really the only real change that's happened. In this case, if I go into edit mode, you can see that the vertex group is just those items. If I go to this group, let's go ahead. So actually, I must have changed something inadvertently. I'll circle back to that in a second. Let's take a look here. This vertex group has just the one. These two apparently are matching closer than I realized. So I'm going to go do really quickly is I'm going to go put this back in object mode, come here, put this in edit mode. I'm going to select all of these vertices. I'm going to go to the data properties tab, and I'm going to assign all of these items to this vertex group. And then let's just go ahead and back in object mode, back to frame 1, push play. It'll take a few seconds to calculate. And you can see it looks like there's a little bit difference in the amount of jiggle in each of these items. So anyway, having taken a few moments to, well, in this case, several moments, but having taken some time to sort of go through this and keep things in play rather than just changing as I go, I'm now going to go back into my project and apply the settings in a more systematic way.